Well, one winter sports team season is over, another presses on.
We'll talk over all of the details for this story and more next on Bobcat Breakdown. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Bobcat Breakdown. I'm Tom Albanese.
And I'm Carolyn Fales. Tom, we saw the postseason tournaments end last week for the men's basketball and women's ice hockey squads, but the other two teams didn't want their seasons to end.
Right you are, Carolyn, and we begin tonight's breakdown with Rand Pecknold's men's ice hockey team.
The men's hockey team traveled to Lake Placid for the third consecutive year to face off in the ECAC semifinals. But the Whitelaw Cup would remain elusive for the Bobcats as they lost for the third straight year, this time against the Harvard Crimson. Harvard took the early lead when Jimmy Vesey scored just 30 seconds into the first period. The Bobcats started the second period down 3-0, but would fight back as both Travis St. Dennis and Soren Janssen found the back of the net for QU. But Rand Pecknold's squad just couldn't get the job done as the game ended in a 5-2 win for the Crimson. Harvard went on to face Colgate in the ECAC championship and won, clinching their spot in the NCAA tournament. Quinnipiac, on the other hand, had to wait to see if they would make the tournament and who they would be matched up against. The Bobcats were given the number 14 seed and will play the number 2 seeded North Dakota in Fargo on Friday night. So Tom, let's start off by talking about this first game. How do you think the Bobcats will match up against UND?
Well, Carolyn, this is going to be a really interesting matchup because obviously Quinnipiac in their out-of-conference schedule, not as many experienced opponents out of the NCHC other than St. Cloud State, who they took on twice, ended up losing one and then winning game two. So this is going to be an interesting test for Quinnipiac because North Dakota coming into this game, just like so much strength and physicality all over the boards. And we were both watching some video right before we went on and how taking some of these players and just really pushing them hard against the boards, that's something Quinnipiac is going to have to get used to earlier in the game. We saw them against Harvard where they lost the physicality battle early, which ended up leading to a 3-0 deficit, earlier in the game. And then this is just how this team hasn't been able to start well, but they're going to have to start well against North Dakota or else they're going to be in big trouble.
And you think UND has it even though they lost their two previous games?
You know, it's interesting because North Dakota coming into this game, as you just mentioned, losing 2 in a row, but they do have a lot of key weapons on the ice, and they just do such a great job. Drake Kujula just leading the team with goals with 16 and points with 33. And Michael Parks, just another big top goal scorer. And you can't get much better than Zane McIntyre in goal for North Dakota. Just done such an unbelievable job, almost a .930 save percentage. This guy is all over the post, and and he's just been doing a great job keeping pucks out of the net.
I think it's exactly what you're saying, Tom. UND scores consistently across all three periods, whereas Quinnipiac, as we know, struggles in that first period. So Quinnipiac needs to bring that stronger first period play. But yeah, I think Quinnipiac shouldn't be counted out. Matthew Pekka said in their press conference on Monday he doesn't think they're the underdog. I think that if they fix what they did wrong last weekend, they definitely have a chance against UND.
They definitely have a chance. I mean, in going back really quickly to that game against Harvard, if Quinnipiac would have gotten off to that strong start, they could have definitely went on to the ECAC finals. But unfortunately, that 3-0 start for Harvard led to ultimately their loss in that game. So the winner of the game between both Quinnipiac and North Dakota is going to play either Michigan Tech or St. Cloud State. Now, the Bobcats beat the Huskies in 2013 Frozen Four, but Carolyn, what are you expecting from both of these teams that compete in the Western region?
I think these are some interesting teams that Quinnipiac or UND might have to play. As you said, Quinnipiac has played St. Cloud before in the Frozen Four, so I think that will be kind of an advantage just because they've seen how they've played. And also, St. Cloud is getting back two of their best players that didn't play in their last two games, so I think that's going to help St. Cloud as well. In terms of Michigan Tech, this is their first appearance since 1981. Yeah. So, I don't know, Tom. They're kind of a little bit out of it, I think. They have a new coach who's been coaching for the last 4 years. I think he's kind of pushing the program ahead. So both of these could be interesting matchups. What do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting for Michigan Tech, as you mentioned, having not been in the tournament for several decades now. But they did this season. They really proved what they can do on the ice. Tied with Minnesota State with 29 wins, tied for the most in the NCAA men's hockey as a whole. So this team, they do have a plethora of weapons on both offense and defense. And I think the key for Michigan Tech is if they can do well defensively against a team like St. Cloud, who we've talked about, did post a lot of quick goals in those two games against Quinnipiac when Quinnipiac obviously traveled up to St. Cloud State for those matchups. But it's going to be interesting to see if Michigan Tech can hold off St. Cloud State. And we see the records. Obviously, it definitely falls in favor of Michigan Tech. But St. Cloud State, like you just mentioned, they're there to fight, and they're there to get back to the Frozen Four, just like Quinnipiac did, or like they both did for that matter 2 years ago.
And they've got that fast tempo type of offensive play as well, so I think it's going to be tough. So now, what do we think is something that Quinnipiac is going to need to bring to North Dakota? What's something that they're going to need to leave behind in Lake Placid?
Well, we talked about it earlier. First period toughness and strength early on in the game. That's something and not just in the ECAC tournament, but we really haven't seen that at all from Quinnipiac this entire season. Rand Pecknold has talked about how his team is the 5th youngest team in the nation, 18 freshmen and sophomores combined on the roster. This team is not used to getting off to that quick lead and getting off to that early lead and getting the pedal to the metal early on in the game against some of these big teams that we talked about in the ECAC leading up to the tournament. They did not do that against Harvard. That's what ultimately led
Right, they're
led
just playing catch
lose.
up the whole game.
Absolutely,
Like.
And even though they did come back with those 2 goals against Harvard, what happened at the end of the game, as head coach Rand Pecknold talked about in his press conference at the tournament, we just basically ran out of time. Harvard ended up coming out after they pulled Gartic from the net, 2 empty net goals right there. So they ran out of time. They need to get that early start, especially against North Dakota, like I talked about earlier, because if they don't do that against North Dakota, they're going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Rand Pecknold says it in every press conference after they lose. They were immature in the first period. Immaturity, that's all he says.
I think immaturity is a big word for this team.
Yeah, definitely.
But you see, like on some games where he says, "I'm really proud of my guys," and they do a great job stepping up. And of course, aside from immaturity, another big word that Rand Pecknold uses in his locker room is character. On the good side, obviously immaturity on the bad side. So this team, if they can build good enough character all the way through for 60 minutes of hockey against North Dakota, they should be in good shape, maybe even leading to a victory potentially.
And then I think something that they need to bring to North Dakota is definitely Gartig just playing strong. I mean, he got taken out in the games in Lake Placid, which was pretty much unseen the rest of the season. So that was surprising. I think he needs to be on his game. We need to see the Michael Gartig of the Union Series before Lake Placid. We need to see him stepping up from his team, saying, I need to do this job for my team.
Definitely.
And I think that combined with making sure that they do well in the first period will give them that key to win.
And with taking out Gartic for Sean Lawrence in those final 4.5 minutes of the first period, obviously Rand Pecknold talked about how it basically got him like that shot in his head saying, get going or else you're not going to be back in the game. And obviously what ended up happening, Gartic didn't give up another goal for the rest of the game.
Exactly. So when we get back, Tom, we're going to be talking women's basketball, and we'll be right back.
The Bobcat Shop, located at 1010 Sherman Avenue in Hamden. Your #1 choice for Bobcat merchandise. The Bobcat Shop features 2 floors of countless styles and colors. With a full 19,000 square foot screen printing and embroidery operation on the premises, Campus Customs and Simplify can design and decorate any garment or promotional product as quickly as needed. Stop in and say hi.
Back to his Hollywood.
This is my mom.
Make it sit here and back.
Welcome to A Sheer Sensation, North Haven's premier cosmetology service, located at 140 Washington Avenue, minutes from Hamden. We offer an array of services, from basic cuts and colors to lash extensions and formaldehyde-free keratin treatments. We also provide hair chalk and styling for men. When you spend $60, your Q card will get you 10% off. Call us at 203-239-6477 to make your next appointment at A Sheer Sensation.
The lone other winter sports team that was still playing was Trisha Fabry's squad. The Bobcats made its second trip to the NCAA tournament in 3 years after defeating the Marist Red Foxes in the MAC Championship. Quinnipiac earned the number 12 seed and needed to travel out west to Palo Alto, California to take on its first round draw, the 5th-seeded Sooners of the University of Oklahoma. Similar to 2 years ago against Maryland, Quinnipiac would end up on the losing end in the first round, falling to Oklahoma 111-84. The loss ends Quinnipiac's historic season with 31 wins, and only 4 losses. Jasmine Martin led the way for Quinnipiac with 24 points in her final game in a Bobcat uniform. Boo Abshire nailed a career-high 4 3-pointers for 12 points to go along with 6 assists to finish her career. Oklahoma was led by Gabby Ortiz, who finished with 16 points for the Sooners. The Sooners would go on to really advance far into the NCAA tournament, Carolyn, by loop. But unfortunately, they did lose to Stanford in the round of 32 game. But what are just some of your takeaways from that game between Quinnipiac and Oklahoma?
Well, I think the biggest factor that ultimately led to the end of their season wasn't that Quinnipiac played bad in the game. It was just that Oklahoma played better. They had such a game. I mean, within the first 4 minutes, they were already ahead 19-5. They never came back to a single point deficit. Sorry, and I just think that Oklahoma was faster, they were bigger, and they were making their shots. So those were all the things that were making it so that Quinnipiac couldn't win this game.
You take away from the experiences of how Oklahoma, a team from the Big 12 with bigger bodies and just so much better offensive shooting. You're absolutely right on there. Now, I agree with you that Quinnipiac not necessarily didn't play too bad. I thought offensively they did a really good job. As I mentioned, Jasmine Martin and Boo Abshire really leading the pace for the Bobcats, and a couple players off the bench, and Ali Martucci and Maria Napolitano, each contributing 10 points for the Bobcats as well. But in the end, the one thing that I think really was the downfall for this team, and it's someone on that starting 5, and I would say that she was been a pretty consistent player throughout the regular season, but when it come time for playoff time, she just wasn't there. And I'm talking about Val Driscoll. Val Driscoll, just someone that was posting up very well during the regular season against the MAC teams, doing a good job, especially later in the season. You started to see her get around that 15 to 20 point range, and really just continuing to do a good job in the paint. The one big thing that got to me from this game, Carolyn, was that Oklahoma had 48 points in the paint. And how does that happen? Like, if you're Val Driscoll, in my personal opinion, because Val Driscoll, you just see her so much. You see so many blocks at her. You see her getting all the defense and offensive rebounds. It just wasn't there. She honestly.
But do you think if she was playing better, they would have won?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know necessarily if they would have won, because I really like. Let me rephrase that. Like, Oklahoma got off to that big start, as you talked about, and so if Val Driscoll would have improved her game, I don't know if necessarily Quinnipiac would have won. But I think if they had lost, it wouldn't have been by the 20-plus points, which it ended up being.
But I just think Oklahoma was playing so well as a team. I mean, they had 27 assists as a team. They were playing together. They had shots across several players. I just think they were going to win that game no matter what.
But 48 points in the paint is something that's really interesting, because especially like someone like Val Driscoll, where it looked like, honestly, she was just basically kind of like painted like a door on her chest. And what did the Oklahoma players do? Just literally going through the door, walking through the paint, just like it's like a rally or something going on here. It's just like, you can't do that if you're Val Driscoll. And that's what ultimately, Oklahoma, I will give you that. Oklahoma did have a lot of three-point shots and did a good job from outside of the perimeter. But how many times did they just walk into the paint and get that layup? It was just too many times.
Okay, Tom. I'll let you in on that one.
So, Carolyn, we really saw how Quinnipiac was getting all they had. They left really all they had left on the court against the Sooners. So, but what do you believe was the biggest factor that ultimately led to this defeat? And I know we touched on it a little bit.
Well, I think, Tom, that the things that we can take away from this game for Quinnipiac is that they need to recruit bigger players. They need to have tough out-of-conference games so they can really prep for these NCAA tournament runs, because I think it's going to be expected going on from this season and the season 2 years ago that Quinnipiac women's basketball is going to be making the NCAA tournament on an almost consistent basis. So I think they need to get those big players, they need to play those out-of-conference games so that they can be ready to play with the big girls.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think really Trisha Fabry had really established a very tough out-of-conference schedule this season. Ultimately, Quinnipiac ended up finishing 8-3 in that conference, in the out-of-conference schedule. Ultimately, that loss to Florida Gulf Coast was a really close loss. They did end up beating St. Joseph's in the game prior to that. This team is built for the future, and unfortunately, like with some of the talent that they're losing, it's interesting to see how this team is going to be moving forward.
Yeah, so Tom, let's talk about that. With their season officially over, the women's basketball team is losing its entire starting lineup from the whole season, of course being Jasmine Martin, Boo Abshire, Samantha Guastella, Nicoline Ostergaard, and Val Driscoll, along with Shayna Earl as well. With these players leaving, is this team still in good shape for next season?
I think it's going to ultimately depend upon the recruits they bring in and then some transfers or whatnot. Obviously, one of the big ones, Jasmine Martin's sister, come into play. And, of course, a lot of people talk about how she may even be better than Jasmine Martin. And us around Q30 Sports, we've been talking about how Jasmine Martin potentially being the best women's basketball player to probably ever put on a Bobcat uniform. So I think it's going to ultimately depend upon the recruits. But when you have players like Adelie Martucci, Maria Napolitano, Jennifer Fay, and the list just goes on for some of the juniors, sophomores and juniors that they have on the team right now, I think it's going to go into a swing up for Quinnipiac. I mean, I think they're in good shape. I'm not, obviously I don't want to predict the future for next season. Maris is still going to be there, obviously. The only player Maris obviously losing is Tori Giroux, and Madeline Blaze is still going to be there. Sydney Coffey Madeline Blaze is still going to be there. Sydney Coffey is the one that's leaving. Excuse me about that. But they're still going to have tough teams like Marist out there. And I think maybe Canisius can come back, maybe even Siena, potentially Monmouth. No one knows. But this team, with what they have right now, you could potentially see them going back to the NCAA tournament. But I think it's going to ultimately depend upon other weapons that they bring in, such as Val Driscoll, who they brought in this season for Quinnipiac.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you, Tom. I don't think they're going to do as well next year. I think that they have those players in Adeline Martucci, Maria Napolitano, Brianna Ramos. I think they all played in the Oklahoma game. I think they're good additions, but I just don't think they have what it takes. Fabry, hell of a coach. She's going to have to work really hard, though, to get this team ready because they have 5 starting players that they're losing, and I just don't think it's going to go well. So when we come back, Tom, we're going to bring in Shameal Samuels, a track player who is going to have an interview with Mark Spillane. We'll be right back.
The Bobcat Shop, located at 1010 Sherman Avenue in Hamden. Your #1 choice for Bobcat merchandise. The Bobcat Shop features 2 floors of countless styles and colors. With a full 19,000 square foot screen printing and embroidery operation on the premises, Campus Customs and Simplify can design and decorate any garment or promotional product as quickly as needed. Stop in and say hi.
We have those back to this Hollywood.
This is my mom.
Make a decision here and back.
Playoff spot,
Welcome to A Sheer Sensation, North Haven's premier cosmetology service, located at 140 Washington Avenue, minutes from Hamden. We offer an array of services from basic cuts and colors to lash extensions and formaldehyde-free keratin treatments. We also provide hair chalk and styling for men. When you spend $60, your Q card will get you 10% off. Call us at 203-239-6477 to make your next appointment at A Sheer Sensation.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Bobcat Breakdown. Thank you for staying with us. Tom and Carolyn have stepped off the desk to a different part of our studio, but they'll be back for the final block of our show. But first, we're going to talk a little track and field with Quinnipiac women's track and field sprinter Shameal Samuels. Shameal, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
All right, let's start things off pretty simple. What first drew you to the sport of track and field?
I didn't start running track until my second year in high school, and I don't know, since middle school I knew I wanted to run, so I tried cross country. I didn't know what it was. So I tried cross country and I hated it. And then I transferred schools, so my coach kind of persuaded me to run track, and I did, and I fell in love with it.
Why Quinnipiac? You're not too far from here down the road in Hartford where you're from. Is that why? Maybe close proximity?
Yeah, I wanted to be close, and I toured the campus, and it was really pretty, so I really liked it.
Let's
and
talk.
The coaches were nice.
Let's talk about the fun stuff now. MAC championships, MAC most outstanding runner of the year on the women's side. 60-meter champion Quinnipiac record. 200-meter champion tied the MAC record. Back-to-back 400-meter MAC champion.
Yeah.
How do you put that into words?
I don't know. It was, I don't know. It was a good day. My coaches told me, well, my strength coach told me to be greedy, so I just tried to be greedy and went for all the records, or all the wins.
Now, something that's very impressive, and a lot of people might not know that don't really follow track and field, is the fact that you're able to run something as short as a 60 and be successful, and then go up to a 400 and be successful. How do you do that? How do you make sure you're able to be successful on both ends of that spectrum?
I'll say I have endurance from cross country, and naturally I have speed, so I can run the 60 and the 200 and not be as tired as most short sprinters, and run the 400 really well. So I'll say it's probably due to my background in cross country.
So the background in cross country helping there. Do you have a memorable moment from the indoor season? You had a lot of success, obviously.
Yeah.
Is there anything that jumps out to you?
I'll probably say winning the New England title and beating the record.
So record breaking, certainly something that you've been used to this year. And we talked about the 60, the 200, the 400. You've also had some outdoor success in your career. Is there a particular race that you like the most?
The 400.
The 400?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think because I'm better at it.
Do you think that the extra distance gives you an advantage? Do you feel you're better in the second half of your race?
Yeah.
Sometimes I know the starts can be a little bit rough on
Yeah.
60s, and if you lose that, then you're in trouble, but you make up ground in the 400, and
Yeah.
certainly done a nice job. One last question for you, moving to the outdoor season. You looking to go break some outdoor records as well?
Oh yeah.
Shameal Samuels looking to break some outdoor records to go along with her indoor record. Shameal, thank you for joining us here on Bobcat Breakdown. We'll be right back after the break. Carolyn and Tom back to talk more Quinnipiac spring sports. Stay with us.
The Bobcat Shop, located at 1010 Sherman Avenue in Hamden. Your #1 choice for Bobcat merchandise. The Bobcat Shop features 2 floors of countless styles and colors. With a full 19,000 square foot screen printing and embroidery operation on the premises, Campus Customs and Simplify can design and decorate any garment or promotional product as quickly as needed. Stop in and say hi.
And we have a back to his Hollywood.
This is my mom.
Make a decision here and fast.
Playoff spot, which
Welcome to A Sheer Sensation, North Haven's premier cosmetology service, located at 140 Washington Avenue, minutes from Hamden. We offer an array of services, from basic cuts and colors to lash extensions and formaldehyde-free keratin treatments. We also provide hair chalk and styling for men. When you spend $60, your Q card will get you 10% off. Call us at 203-239-6477 to make your next appointment at A Sheer Sensation.
Thanks for staying with us. So now, Tom, we're going to do a little fact or fiction. We'll start with a statement about one of the spring sports and decide if it's a fact or if it's fiction. So let's start, Tom, with softball. Do you think softball, fact or fiction, is going to get more than 10 MAC wins this season?
I'm going to have to say fiction on this one. You know, you have a bunch you only have not as much of a senior-dominated team this year. More seniors had graduated last year in terms of the team for last season. And last season, they didn't even do that well in finishing in the middle of the pack in terms of the MAC as well. Obviously, they're going to really rely on players like Hannah Lindsley, Jordan Palucci, Nikki Barber, and Brittany Sear, the 4 seniors on this squad. And Hannah Lindsley, who just this week was also actually named MAC Pitcher of the Week, She's good on many occasions, but she also has that scenario to also fall apart in mid-innings and give up that big inning to end up losing it for her team. And if the offense can come around, you could potentially see them make a push, but I just don't see it, Carolyn.
I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. They have 18 MAC games this season, and I just don't see them winning 10 of them. As you said, Hannah Lindsley did have a good week. She went 7 for 15 at bat in her last 5 games. She's doing pretty well, but you need more players like Hannah Lindsley in order to win those games, and I just don't think they have them.
And Hannah Lindsley probably can only be that good, consistent pitcher, and that's something that this team has really lacked over the past several seasons is who is going to be that consistent pitcher? Who's going to be that someone to just pitch innings in, out, and just continue to be that consistent? She wasn't even consistent herself last season, so I just don't see it this year either. I couldn't agree more.
All right, let's move on to lacrosse. We're going to go fact or fiction. Either of the lacrosse teams making the MAC playoffs. What do you think for men's?
For men's, I'm actually going to say fact. I could see this team making a run this season. Obviously, coming off a win, 13-12 over Detroit, and currently 1-1 conference play, 2-5 overall. So maybe not as bad. Might look a little bit uneven in terms of out of conference play. But what did we talk about earlier with basketball and hockey? You really try to schedule those tough out of conference games. Lacrosse is no different. This team, I think, is going to start to make a run. I think they're going to start to get their game a little bit together, and top 4 teams out of the 7 teams that they have in the MAC right now do make the MAC playoffs. I think this team is going to make a run, so I'm going to say fact. I think they are going to make it.
I'm going to disagree with you, Tom. I think fiction on this one as well. Well, they have been doing well. They just played Detroit last week, had a thrilling 13-12 win, I think, over them.
Right.
But I just don't think they have what it takes. Michael Sagal scored 4 goals for them, but I just really think this team is still building up. I remember their coach last year talking a lot about how they rebuilding. I just don't think they have what it takes this year. So moving on to women's lacrosse, fact or fiction, I think this one's fiction as well, Tom. They won 2 games last season, so I just really don't see them taking it from this year. I mean, they do have Kelly Babstock coming in. That's kind of a fun, exciting thing for them to have a new player who is on the hockey team. Her, Kira Aquat, they're great players, but 2 wins last season, Tom, come on, they're not going to do it this year.
And honestly, I think Aquat and Babstock are really the only 2 biggest scoring threats that this team does have. So I couldn't agree more with you. I'm going to say fiction on this one as well. And you just talked about how they only they only won 2 games last season. Well, they only have 1 to start this season through 8 games, so 1-7, and they're coming up later in this week is going to be the defending champion Canisius. That's obviously going to be a very tough test as well. Doesn't look like too good. So moving on to our final question, fact or fiction, Carolyn, the Quinnipiac baseball team, will they have more of a winning season in conference play this season than they did last season? What do you say?
I'm going to say fact on this one, Tom. Baseball is my spring sport that I think is going to do well. This team is this season and is going to shock this season. They have that new coach, that young blood. I mean, he was an assistant coach at Quinnipiac, but I think they're doing well. They have some good pitchers, and I think they're going to be able to do it.
They can definitely do it, but as we saw at the end of last season, they started hot, but then as the season went on, they really started to go downhill. So I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say fiction on this one. For me, I think definitely the men's lacrosse team is going to be the team to watch for this season. I think, yes, I do agree with you that they were rebuilding, and I think the baseball team is currently rebuilding right now. They do have players like Mike Palladino as pitcher, Vin Galletti and Scott Donahue leading the way on the offensive end. But again, you don't have as much offense. They're bringing a lot of people back, and they did go to the postseason last year. So I don't know, Tom. I guess we'll see. We'll have to see.
So that's all the time we have this week for Bobcat Breakdown.
For all the latest on Quinnipiac sports, make sure you check out Q30television.com and follow us on Twitter at Q30Sports.
For Tom Albanese, I'm Carolyn Fales. Thanks for joining us.